Okay, I believe we are live. So I'm just going to say hi to the chat room. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming in on a Tuesday night. This is not Saturday baseball. It's nothing but fantasy on Tuesday nights. Today we have Derek Carty. We have every one of my guests has so many credentials. But so you were the youngest winner of LABR, the National League only LABR, which is amazingly hard. So that plus you're with Roto Grinders now. You have been with Baseball Prospectus, Hardball Times, ESPN, Sports Center, pretty much every outlet for fantasy. Also, you graduated from the MLB Scouting Bureau Scout Development Program. You're the only one that has, right, in the fantasy industry. Is that still true?
As far as I know, I think they might even discontinue the program. So yeah, I think so. That was a cool experience.
Oh, I bet. I really bet that was. I was actually a little bit jealous when I saw that on your website. So, but today we're going to talk a lot about your tool, your projections tool. It's a baseball algorithmic tool. So it's called the BAT. And recently you came out with the BAT X, which is where you added StatCast data to the BAT. I was listening to a podcast that you were on just a couple weeks ago with Ariel Cohen, and you were talking about how you came up with the BAT X. I mean, last year, so I think it was last year, maybe 2019, you let me try out the BAT, and I used it for DFS, and I was actually pretty successful. But my question is, there's the projections at Fangraphs that everybody can access, and then you have the DFS version at Roto Grinders, and there's also another sports betting version available at EV Analytics. Tell me, are there any differences in the three of these?
I mean, there's no difference in how it's created. Like, it's all the same algorithms. It's all the same tool. It's just a matter of application. Fangraphs is a site that is, geared towards people who play season-long fantasy. So the season-long projections are there. Roto Grinders is a site geared towards DFS play. So, the DFS projections are there. EV Analytics is a sports betting site. And so the sports betting projections are over there. So, it's kind of, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same math behind it.
So there's four main projection systems at Fangraphs. And I've been spending a little time going through ever since I had Ariel Cohen on the show, and he talked to me about how he comes up with the ATC projection system, how he takes what works from a lot of different systems, and then he puts them all together. So I've been doing my own thing with Google Sheets, looking at the BAT, comparing it to the other projection systems. And I actually, when I first started writing our questions down, I noticed that I thought the BAT was not very high on Trevor Bauer. I was like, the BAT doesn't really like Trevor Bauer, but that's really not the case. He actually is probably more liked by the BAT than he is at other projection systems. Well, let me go back for a second. Let me go back to this. You added the StatCast data. Do you notice any players or any real big differences between the BAT and the BAT X?
Yeah, there's always going to be some guys that it's going to like more. And it's usually going to be the guys that have the good StatCast data. Right. A few guys off the top of my head that I know for this year, I know it likes Dansby Swanson a lot more, and it liked him a lot more last year, and he had a really good season. But the traditional projection systems, they're the original, the BAT, pretty much any of the other ones out there, they're still not really buying into Dansby Swanson that much. But the BAT X, it still really likes him.
Does it need more than 1 year of data? Or is it just the like advanced data that they're using, launch angle, barrels, like this type of thing?
So anytime you have more data, it is a good thing. But once you have even one full season of that data, you can start drawing some conclusions from it. Ideally, you would have two. So a guy like Swanson, he's had two, or I guess 1.5 if we're counting 2020 as a half a season. He's had two good seasons of good StatCast data, and the BAT X is really buying into him, pretty significantly more than everyone else, it seems like. But like everything else, it's not like, I think a lot of people, they say, oh, we have this new StatCast data and we know that it's, skill based and we can just trust it immediately. And that's not necessarily true. Like, it is still prone to having randomness in it, the same as any other stat does. And so it is important not to try to trust it too soon. But obviously it is more stable than the older stuff. So that's kind of the whole point of why I built the Bat X, was to figure out exactly when we can start trusting it and how we can combine it with all the things that we already know.
Last year was the first year that you tried out the Bat X. How did it turn out for you? I mean, it's really a tough time to come out with a new system when you have like 60 games and it's, there's a big question as to whether or not, or how much the stats from last year even count.
Yeah. So last year was very challenging, to say the least. Like you said, it wound up really, really good. Ariel Cohen, who you just mentioned, he actually ran a study over at Fangraphs, and he found that the Bat X was the most accurate of every projection system that he tested, which was really nice and really validating for something that was, like you said, brand new, being thrown right into the fire of this new season with all sorts of crazy things going on. So it was really nice to see that.
What about rookies and prospects? How do you, I'm sure that you don't, do you agree with everything the Bat says? So as far, okay, let me just say an example, Dansby Swanson. Are you buying into Dansby Swanson?
I am. I'm definitely buying into Dansby Swanson. I see the things that the Bat X sees about him and why it likes him. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. There are times where I don't completely agree. I'll have my own opinions. I'll have a scouting take, especially when it comes to pitchers. Right now, the Bat X doesn't do pitchers. And there are certainly times where it's like, well, this guy's not the same pitcher he was 2 years ago. He's coming off Tommy John surgery and his velocity's down and he's not throwing his curveball as much, or this guy added a curveball this year. So eventually when the Bat X for pitchers comes out, it's going to account for that. But that's really the biggest hole right now and the biggest reason why I would disagree with one of my systems.
Well, yeah. And I mean, there's a human element involved here, and there's a lot to be said about, I mean, too bad the Bat can't bring in like home life, or like relationship woes.
That would be incredible. The problem, of course, is that we don't know how to quantify that, like even a little bit. But if we could, that would be amazing. That would for sure go into my systems.
I mean, I wonder and projection systems. So this bat can be used for season long. I mean, that's what really I think most people are doing, especially this time of year, because we're getting ready to draft for season long.
Yep.
Once the season does start, the Bat takes in all kinds of information, and it still does that overall, right? I mean, it still does say, well, Bauer or maybe even Shane Bieber, he pitched against a lot of teams in the Central Division, and there's not just him, but Bauer and a lot of other really good last season. They were pitching against very easy competition, and both the Bats take that into consideration.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something that a lot of people have kind of talked about. But a lot of times people have talked about it that I've seen more in like a qualitative way. Like, oh yeah, like he had easier competition, so let's not buy into him as much. One of the cool things I think about the Bat is that it accounts for that. And it's accounted for that for years. It looks at every single at-bat that a player has taken in his entire career and the context of the at-bat. This at-bat was in Coors Field and it was 80 degrees and this was the umpire and this was the defensive alignment at every position. And, this was the weather and the pitcher and everything else. And it says, okay, well, based on that, basically it gives it like a difficulty scale, like, well, that at-bat happened in a really difficult scenario, so he gets more credit for what he did. Or that was really easy, so he gets less credit for what he did.
When you does the umpire really make a big difference in the player stats, do you think?
On an individual at-bat basis, yeah, the umpire makes a pretty significant difference. Over the course of an entire season, players will have, many, many umpires behind the plate. It tends to average out. There will be some guys, where, maybe they just got really unlucky and just had a bunch of pitchers umpires or something like that. But over a full season, it tends to even out. Over a 60-game season, it evens out less. So, I mean, again, it's something that I think does give the Bat an edge, with a smaller season like we had last year.
For sure. And definitely, I mean, it makes sense that it matters in DFS. It definitely matters in DFS. I mean, I don't really know like the extremities for the extreme sides for the umpires, like how far they go out of the middle, but it's just another thing to add in there that can make it that much more, good. good at what
I mean,
it
that's
does.
exactly it. Like, I'm not going to pretend like the bat is the only good projection system out there. Like, most projection systems are pretty good, and we're kind of fighting for the edges. And I think things like that definitely give the bat, some edge.
Okay, so I was looking and noticing just the other day, I said on my Saturday show, I said that, we've been seeing a decrease in stolen bases for the last 5 or 6 years. We've been watching the number of the number of stolen bases is going down, plus the number of hitters that are stealing bases is going down. And I mean, I kind of chalk that up to the fact that there's so much power in the game that it's just not worth risking an out on the base paths when these runners half the time are getting caught stealing. So when I was looking at the stat at the bat, both of the bat systems, and I noticed that there are a lot of batters projected to steal at least 10 bases. But it was like 80 something. It's in the low 80s for both of the bats. And that really isn't that crazy. It's about like 10 or 12 more than we would have seen last year had it been a full season, or even the year before. It was just only about 12 more hitters that are going to steal 10 or more bases. But then I go and I look at Zips, okay? Zips, 271 batters projected to hit. Are these projections at Zips? Or are they just saying, like, if he gets I mean, seriously, and that's crazy. That would mean for fantasy that you don't even have to worry about stolen bases.
Yeah, so my understanding of Zips is that he doesn't necessarily try to project playing time too precisely. He more projects, if this guy gets a lot of at-bats, this is what he's going to do. And again, I don't want to speak for Dan, but I think that's kind of what Zips is supposed to do. So you'll see more guys projected for stolen bases like that, I think, because he has more guys just projected for plate appearances, like more plate appearances than will actually be taken in the season.
I mean, just the hitters alone, he has he has almost 1,200 hitters on here. And, 2/3 of these guys aren't even going to be in the major leagues next year. So I really, but going back to this, are we seeing a resurgence in stolen bases, do you think? Or just maybe not the number of stolen bases, but the number of hitters that we can draft that will actually steal some bases relevant. So if you get like 5 or 6, 10 stolen base guys, you don't have to worry about getting anybody that steals 25 or 30 bases.
Yeah. It's tough because, like you said, stolen bases have really been on a decline for a long time. And it kind of makes sense because major league teams are getting smarter. They're even managers are starting to get a little bit smarter, maybe. And stolen bases, I mean, there's still a lot of really bad managers when it comes to like tactical things. But stolen bases really don't impact run scoring that much. They're cool. They're fun to watch. We love them for fantasy. But in terms of like real world, I'm going to help my team win games production, stolen bases do very, very little. And so managers are like, why am I going to risk, getting an out for something that's really not going to impact run scoring that much? So I think that's part of what we've seen. And then also part of it is the shift to, just the guys who get playing time aren't, I don't think is comprised of as many speedsters as there used to be, because again, teams are getting smarter. They realize that the way to score runs is through power. And so the players that are actually playing are power hitters more than they used to be, I think. So, I think it's a combination of those things, but, and I think it's also kind of what you determine to be a good amount of steals. If we were playing fantasy 10 years ago, a guy who steals 10 bases, you really wouldn't be that excited about, I don't think. But now you're like, oh, we got 80 guys who are going to steal 10 bases. Like, that's great. So it's kind of, I think, just a matter of perspective.
For sure. I mean, you have Mondesi stealing 51. It says the Mondesi is going to steal 51 bases. That's according to the Bat X. 52 bases according to the Bat. So that's really, there's 52 bases. It's unbelievable. But it didn't used to be unbelievable. I mean, we had lots of guys stealing bases. Okay, moving on from that. How have you dealt with the DH? Are you planning? Does the Bat think there's going to be a DH in the National League, or does the Bat not know yet?
So, I mean, the Bat doesn't know. I don't think anybody knows, which is outrageous because we're in the middle of February and nobody knows. Major league teams don't know. Half the free agents still are unsigned because major league teams don't know. But right now, the Bat is assuming that there's going to be a DH. I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's wrong. But last year there was a DH. My code was set up for the DH. I think they're going to keep it. So I'm like, I'm not going to change the code back to no DH and then have them come out, February 28th and be like, you know what, we're doing a DH again and have to change it back again. So for now, keeping it the way it was. And I think that's probably the right choice anyway.
How much do you think? Well, I believe that it will be one of the biggest things that, it depends on how much weight you put on it in your projections. But to me, I would think that if I was creating the projections, I would probably have to put a pretty hefty weight on the DH in the National League for the hitters, at least in the National League, or the fringe hitters, maybe. I don't know. It's one more hitter in the order every day.
Yeah, it is. It's going to deepen our fantasy pool if that's what, and it's kind of nice to have those extra hitters in there, especially when you get into deeper leagues. So
Sure.
It's nice. And I do think it creates kind of a weird situation with pitchers though, especially because kind of the ball has been juiced the last couple of years and we have the NLDH now. A lot of times people will look at the pitcher projections and they're like, why do you have this guy's ERA projected so high? I'm like, it's really not that high. He's like top 20 in baseball. It's just like everyone's ERAs are high because that's what it is. And that came out yesterday. Maybe it was today. I lose track of time. They're going to try to de-juice the ball a little bit. So that'll get accounted for soon too. But run environment is important. I think people have a perception of like what a good ERA is or what a good batting average is in their head. But it's always relative to the rest of the league. It's not like there's a concrete value that's good or bad.
For sure. In fact, that brings up a point that I was looking at. Sometimes I like to analyze. In Google Sheets, they have this area where you can analyze the data. You can look at just how the columns and the rows, just the different things that they say. The histogram graph that I made for the batting average shows that like a good, where the bell curve is at the highest is about 240 batting average. It is so low. It's unbelievable how low the batting average is just in comparison to only about 5 years ago. So that's pretty important, right? To compare it to the league.
That's exactly what I mean. Like if you tell someone, oh, this guy's going to hit 240 this year, they're going to be like, oh my God, what a terrible hitter. But that's basically league average. So yeah, that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of people have kind of missed. And it's kind of shifted pretty quickly over the last couple of years. This has been a fairly drastic shift, in the scope of things.
I can't remember where you probably know. Where can you find that at Fangraphs? It's where you can find the league average for batting average, on base percentage.
If you go to the leaderboards and then you do the league tab, I think it says league stats, you can see the league average for any season you want right there.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm looking at this. I just found it the other day, but I'm not going to waste time like searching around for that. But yes, you can find it.
Last year, the league average batting average was 245. That is a lot lower than I think most people would guess.
Totally. A couple years ago, it was on base percentage. Somebody told me that like the average on base percentage, and I said, no way. I'm really trying to get on base percentage, 360, 370. It's not even close to that anymore. So, don't miss out on that. That's important stuff because a 240 batting average sounds horrible, but obviously it's not as bad as we think it is anymore.
Exactly.
So rookies, I think I heard you saying on a podcast that the rookies, the Bat X likes the rookies less than the Bat. Explain that to me.
The Bat X doesn't like rookies less than the Bat. It likes rookies the same as the Bat because we don't have StatCast data on from minor leagues. So it has no new data to go on. So it's just the same for both for rookies.
Okay. How do you feel about rookies? How many rookies do you have on your team? Do you try to just have a couple, or do you just love them?
I'm a projection guy. So I kind of hate rookies mostly because they always get drafted higher than I'm willing to pay for them, because what a projection does is it tries to take the most likely outcome for a player. And for rookies, the range of outcomes is very wide. A guy can come up and he can be Ronald Acuna or Fernando Tatis right away, and he's a stud. And that's what people want to get when they're drafting a rookie high. They're like, I saw what happened to Acuna. I saw what happened to Tatis. That's what I'm going to try to get by drafting Luis Robert or by drafting Wander Franco or whoever. But there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance, I think, for some people where they forget about the rookies that don't do that. They forget about what Byron Buxton did when he came up. They forget about what Dansby Swanson did, what Yohan Moncada did, what Lucas Giolito did. Like all these elite prospects, like best prospect in the game type guys came up and they were not good right away. And so what a projection does is it considers both sides of that. And so it says, well, on average, this rookie's really probably not going to be that great. And so from a raw value standpoint, rookies are rarely good values, especially rookie hitters. So for me, like I struggle with it because people are like, you're so low on rookies and you were so wrong about Tatis and you were so wrong about Acuna. It's like, well, guys, the process is right. It's just you're picking out the outliers. So I have a really love-hate relationship with rookies.
I remember when you posted about Fernando Tatis and you got just, oh my gosh, it was like a Twitter ice storm. Okay. But I agree with you. And I do it. The facts are the facts. I mean, everybody wants to believe in prospects. That's fine. But why do you forget about last year's prospects when they don't pan out exactly like when you wanted them to? I mean, the Vlad Jr. hype is still fairly intact, but you see that every year where it's a guy like Joe Adele or Wander Franco or anybody that comes up. If they don't perform right away, then we forget about them. We're on to the next shiny new toy. And it's really bad. It's just a bad idea in fantasy because you do never know what is going to happen with the prospects. You don't even know most of the time when they're going to get called up. And we do know for sure that it's okay in baseball to leave a player that's ready for the majors down in the minor leagues just to keep control of this player for another season. And they proved that again with the Chris Bryant thing that Chris Bryant took him to court and they said, we're going to allow this to happen. So why wouldn't they do that? Right.
Exactly. I mean, it's just smart business from a major league team, the risk is you piss the player off and they don't want to get extended, but that's 6 years down the line. There's a lot of time to earn goodwill back, over that period. And you save a whole bunch of money, especially if you're not a contending team. There's really no incentive for teams to promote guys early.
Absolutely zero incentive. And especially if you're a team such as a low money team like Pittsburgh, you would just be crazy to bring these players up early. So, but that's what I was thinking of is the stats for the minor leagues. They're just never impressive. Even if the batter or the hitter is supposed to be like this great, star of the generation, you can't look at their stats and be like, oh, he's just crushing the ball down in the minor leagues. It just seems like their stats are always much lower.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing about projecting rookies is that we only have this minor league data to go on. A lot of times, like in the case of Tatis, like the minor league data was really unimpressive. Like it really just was nothing special. And we knew from a scouting standpoint, yeah, this guy has tools, he has skills. One day he could be really great. But I don't think anybody who is a logical thinker thought that Fernando Tatis was going to be a star right away. It just, it was just an unlikely scenario that wound up happening. Like that happens sometimes.
It does, but I think it happens more now than it used to, but it still is not, your odds and your chances are not good. Fernando Tatis, I remember looking at his minor league stats. He was striking out like 30% of the time in the minors.
That's a lot. Like you would expect if he's striking out 30% of the time in the minors, a projection system's going to say, okay, in the majors, he's going to strike out even more than that, like project him for 35% or whatever. And so that's just kind of the way they have to operate.
Another player that the bat loves is Luis Robert. And right? No, is it Robert that the bat loves?
The Bat X actually kind of likes Luis Robert this year, which I'm excited about because it doesn't always like these young guys. But it's, I think, the highest system on Fangraphs on Robert. And Robert's one of the biggest differences between the Bat and the Bat X. So yeah, it likes Robert this year. I think it's the only system on Fangraphs projecting him for over 30 home runs.
I love Robert too. Plus he steals bases, and I really do believe he'll steal more bases than Moncada. We talked about that just last week on the show. What do you think? Do you think Moncada is still a base stealer? Because he's getting to the age where, stolen bases do not improve over your aging process. They get worse and they go down. There's no question about it. Moncada did not even try to steal a base last year. What's up with Moncada?
Stolen bases are one of the hardest things to evaluate because, like you said, one, the age curve is just straight down. Like, it doesn't matter how old you are. You can be a 19-year-old kid. You're getting slower every single year of your life. Like that's what happens to people. Not all of them. There's exceptions, but on average, you always get worse. You always get slower. And stolen bases are also, unlike hits, walks, strikeouts, home runs, anything. Those are like completely skill-based stats. Stolen base is a skill-based stat, but also a decision-based stat. You know, the hitter or the manager has to say, okay, you are going to try to steal a base. And that is a hard thing to project because it's not just being like, okay, this guy's good at stealing bases. It's like, this guy's good at stealing bases and he realizes it enough that he's going to try to do it this amount of times. And that's a hard thing to do. So, like, I mean, I think Moncada probably starts stealing bases again this year. Like, I don't think it's going to be zero, but, you know, guys like that are difficult.
So Eugenio Suarez, okay, nobody thinks he's hurt now, obviously, because we have lots of home runs projected for him. I was just looking at his stats for last year. He hit 15 home runs. That's 45 home runs. I shouldn't even really be talking about him, but I was just surprised, I guess, to see him up at the top with the other guys that are going to hit 40 bombs. We have 7 hitters projected to hit 40 home runs and 23 total that are going to hit 35 home runs. What's going on here? Lots of home runs.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that the bat is way higher on than other systems, and the bat X likes him less than the bat, and it still is higher than every other system. And it's like you said, like last year, if you prorated to a full season, you said 45 home runs, right? The year before, he hit 49 home runs, and he plays in one of the best power parks in baseball, maybe the best power park in baseball. And so, you know, some of the StatCast data, there's reason for concern. That's why the bat X likes him less than the bat. But that power is there. Like the last 2 seasons, he's averaged like 47 home runs per a full season. And every other projection system's like, 35. So, I mean, I don't know. Like, I think in the 40s sounds right to me.
Well, okay, you're right. It is much higher than the other systems. I have the Steamer project him at 34 or 35, and Zips has him at like 32. And the thing is that if you just, I mean, it's his numbers don't say that they don't give me any reason to think that he wouldn't do that again, since he's done it for like several years now. And his age is not old. So, I mean, you could still hit 40 home runs at age 29. He's 29. So
yeah, he's a guy that I feel weird about. Like when you ask about guys that, that like I maybe disagree with the projection on, like he's a guy that I don't feel great about drafting, but like you look at it and it's like, well, yeah, that's what he's done.
So I think all the systems, I at least the bat systems, they view Rhys Hoskins. Do you have any? I think that the Phillies with Rhys Hoskins could be much better if he could actually just be what we know he is, but he hasn't really been performing up to that level at all. So I don't know if, but it's still being projected at 36 home runs for the bat X. And the other one I noticed rather high too. I mean, it was in the high 30s at least.
Yep, the bat X I think is the highest system on Rhys Hoskins, and I really like him. Like he was a guy early last year that he was like awful. Like the first 3 weeks or a month of 2020, he was just awful. And in DFS, he got really, really cheap, and the bat kept recommending him to people, and everyone's like, I don't want to play Rhys Hoskins. He hasn't gotten a hit in 2 weeks. He's awful. Like, why do you still like him? And it's like, well, you look at all the StatCast stuff, you look at his, his plate discipline metrics and everything. He's literally the same guy, and he's just getting unlucky. And over the rest of the season, he was fantastic. Like he actually had probably his second best season of his career after his rookie year. Obviously small sample size and everything, but he had a 382 WOBA. He hit 10 home runs in less than 200 plate appearances. Like you wouldn't have thought that he ended up there based on how bad he was to start. but he got real good after that start. And all the underlying metrics supported it. So like, I do really like Rhys Hoskins. I think he's getting underdrafted. I think because of that perception of his rough start, because he's kind of getting older now, like he's a little boring, like people don't like boring guys, but
Right.
he's still 27 with a bunch of power, playing in a good power park and a great lineup, coming off a really good season when all was said and done. So I really think Hoskins is a great value this year.
I do too. I definitely see the talent in him. 168 overall at NFBC since January 1st, which to me, that's literally round like 16 or 15. That could be a real sleeper this year for sure if he just pulled it together. I don't know how old he is because I can't see his numbers right in front of me, but he's not.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, he's 27. You said 27.
Mm-hmm.
It's perfect age,
27.
right? That's what they tell us. It's the perfect age, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I like I'm looking at Dansby Swantons. I like Rhys Hoskins especially where he's being drafted. Who else are some sleepers that you like this year? Maybe, I don't know. This is not a question that I put in the outline. So that's just a really kind of rude thing to be like putting you on the spot and saying, come up off the top of your head with some sleepers right this minute. So I understand if you can't, if you haven't done that. Have you done drafts? Are you drafting yet?
Sorry, go ahead.
You have drafts going on yet? Have you drafted any of your teams?
I haven't drafted any teams. I haven't gotten super deep into like player prep yet. I've been focusing on football and focusing on developing the Bat X for pitchers. So I haven't gotten into this yet, but kind of just looking over the guys that I know the Bat X likes more than their average draft positions. It is a lot of these kind of older, more boring guys like Joey Votto. Joey Votto, I think, is a really strong value this year, but he's an old, boring guy. But he was good last year again, and his StatCast numbers have gotten better. Like he's a guy who it looks like is actively trying to change his approach as he ages to acclimate to the the new game that we find ourselves in. So I like Joey Votto. I like Josh Bell, especially going to Washington this year. Like he's getting out of Pittsburgh, which is a terrible park for power, especially for righties. A good park upgrade, great schedule this year. Interleague play is the AL East, all those hitters parks. And he's playing in a good lineup now. And he's a guy that in 2019 was fantastic. So I really like a guy like Josh Bell. I like a guy like Andrew McCutchen, who's old and boring, but is just always going to give you good value. Like those are the kind of guys that I gravitate towards a lot of times. The guys that still have the skills are still going to be giving you reliable production, but people they don't see enough ceiling on. And so they let them slip in drafts because that upside isn't there. But like, you don't need upside with every pick. Like if you're going to give me free value on these guys, I'm going to take it.
The upside is really, okay, first of all, well, everybody loves upside, just like they love the shiny new toys. And that's why these veteran players are considered boring. Like, okay, here's one, Brandon Belt. What is up with Brandon? Nobody gives Brandon Belt any love, but he's definitely somebody at the end of your draft. If you needed a corner infielder, or if you just whatever, he's going to play every day. And he's kind of boring. And Josh Bell going to the Nationals now definitely has a better lineup. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you don't even have to look the stats to know that any team is practically better than Pittsburgh, if not every team, for scoring runs. And with Joey Votto, it's interesting that you say that. I had an argument with Lenny about Joey Votto and whether or not he was like done, and he was just not going to get better. He's not going to get better. He's had his best season, but is he fantasy relevant? It's not really about the ceiling at the end of the draft for me as much as it is filling holes in category stats. Like
I think Joey, that's exactly it. Like I think Joey Votto, even in a 12 or a 15 team mixed league, I think is a firm starting caliber player that you can draft basically like at the end, like in like a bench spot. And he's like a legit starter. You can wait on first base and take a guy like Joey Votto late. You mentioned Brandon Belt. I think he's in a very similar situation. Like he is old and boring, but he had a really great season last year. He's another guy whose StatCast numbers look really good. Like these guys, people just overlook.
So Joey Votto, guess where he's going? 352 overall ADP at NFBC. That's unbelievable. 352. That's like not even, he's free. He's like not even drafted in leagues.
You get a good starter that you can get in the last round. Like, that's just insane. Like, I don't understand it.
Dude, I don't get it either. That's crazy talk. Okay, crazy talk. Who else was I going to bring up? You said that you're working on the bat for football. Wait, did you say
for pitchers?
And did you say you have something for football projection system too?
Oh yeah, I do. I have. It's called the Blitz. I do the Blitz for football. So like football, playoffs were still going on. So like I was kind of still doing that sort of thing. Kind of juggling my time between football and baseball. But really, this early in the off season, I'm still kind of developing upgrades. And then in another couple of weeks, I'll start getting ready for drafts.
Have you used the Blitz? Wait, it's called the Blitz. Have you used it yet? Is it out? Is it going?
Oh yeah, it's been out for about 3 years. It's only for DFS right now. Probably will do a season-long product this year, but it's been really good for DFS.
I can only imagine. I'm of the belief that if you master fantasy baseball, then football should be really no problem for you. I don't know how.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I mean it's like you said. There is. Baseball is difficult, and there's a lot of overlap in the way you project, sport player performance. Football does have some of its own challenges that you have to, create new things for, but there is a good amount of overlap, and football's been a lot of fun.
How do you account for injuries in football? Because honestly, football comes down to whose team gets the injured the least.
Yeah, I mean, injuries in any sport are very difficult to account for. If a player gets injured in the middle of the game, there's nothing you can do about it. This year, it felt like every week my team had a guy injured in the middle of the game. Or no, worse. This year, twice, a guy got injured in pregame warmups, and it didn't get reported until the game started. That is the worst.
That's a big problem with football. I think they've fixed it up a little bit just in the last couple of years, but it used to be like, it would be questionable, probably not, probably so. Like it was just all of these really, you had to be watching on Saturday morning or Sunday morning. You better be watching and looking at the news to figure out who you need to bench if you have any questionable guys, right? Like football is really hard.
Yep. Every Sunday morning, 11:30 a.m. inactives come out. You look at who's playing, who's out. You adjust projections accordingly. That was my last football season.
We're talking to Derek Carty, and you can find the bat tool at Roto Grinders. And I mean, you're always at First Pitch Forum in Arizona, and we love seeing you all the time. That's where you first met Lenny. I think you've known Lenny longer than I have, maybe like right around the same time.
Yeah.
But he always tells a story about you coming when you were young to the First Pitch Forum. You were going to go there no matter what. Did you even drive then? Were you old enough to drive?
Was not old enough to drive yet.
I mean, Derek, you've accomplished so much in your young age, and that you should be very proud of that. I mean, you really you decided what you love to do, and you just went after it. And I think it's a great accomplishment for you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, that's definitely how I feel. I feel very grateful every day to be able to do this, that I've kind of been able to make this into a career that that pays the bills. Like it's really awesome. Not a lot of people can, find their passion, much less accomplish it and do it and kind of make a living out of it. So it's really nice.
I mean, just I don't know, you just you figured out what you wanted, and you just put your head down and you just kept working towards it. I mean, in the first couple years that you were competing in these expert leagues, I mean, you were doing more than like a full-grown adult could even do without any other job. Okay, you were writing articles, you were doing sabermetrics, you were on TV, you were like running hardball times, you were doing everything. So, I mean, that really is a culmination of hard work, and networking that you're very good at too, because you're such a nice guy. But okay, so who's the bat down on? Who is the bat saying don't draft this guy when other systems might be saying that you should? I know that you don't do pitchers yet, but I don't know. Go ahead. Do you know any offhand that the bat is saying no to?
So the bat does pitchers, but I don't have the bat X pitchers yet, where it accounts for changes in velocity and movement and spin and stuff like that.
Okay.
But I do know one pitcher that the bat does not like this year, and people get upset when I say it. The bat is very low on Max Fried relative to where he's being drafted. I think a lot of people just really want to see like greatness out of Max Fried, but I'm kind of skeptical about it a little bit. Like, he's not a guy who strikes a bunch of players. He's not a guy who strikes a lot of people out. He doesn't have awesome control to compensate for it. And his schedule this year is very tough. I talked about with Josh Bell a little bit how his schedule looks really good going into the American League East and interleague play, playing in Yankee Stadium and Fenway and wherever the Jays end up playing in Baltimore. But that cuts the other way for a guy like Fried, who has to go into all of these hitters' parks and play against these good offenses in interleague play. And the National League East offenses that he's going to be playing in all the interdivision games, they're really good. Like, the Mets offense is amazing this year, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the Nationals are getting better. They had guys like Josh Bell. So I think it's a tough road for Max Fried, and he's a guy who I don't really see the track record being there the way people are kind of treating it like it is.
Let's see where he's going. I could tell you. I know Lenny's a big fan of Max Fried. I think that comes with seeing him in Arizona. Do you remember? This guy was striking out so many batters in Arizona just a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm. He's a legit prospect. Like, he has the pedigree. The stuff is pretty good. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes that step forward and becomes really great. But I just don't think he's there yet. Like, even his minor league numbers, he was striking out a batter per inning, less than that at Double-A. So, I just think there's a little bit of reason for, just to temper expectations a little on him.
I have to say, I will not have any shares of Max Fried. Look at where he's going, 65th overall ADP.
That's high.
He's going before guys like Steven Strasburg. I can understand because he's always hurt. But how about Ryu? I would probably take Ryu above.
I think I would too.
For sure. Dinelson Lamet.
Oh yeah.
I could say Jose Barrios, Kyle Hendricks. Probably I would take them. And that doesn't even mention all the hitters that are going after him in that round, which would be like round 5, I guess, or 6. That's just too early for me too. I agree with you 100%. Are there any other ones that you how do you like Trevor Bauer? Are you going to draft him this year? He's going way too high for me. I'm a big fan, but I won't.
Yeah, I think he's going too high for me now. I think after he joined the Dodgers, everyone's like, oh, this is best possible landing spot. So it's from what I read, his ADP since the signing has really jumped up, where he's basically in line with DeGrom, Cole, Bieber, and just like right behind them. And that's too high for me. Like, I would much rather have either of those 3 guys. Nothing against Bauer, but like, it's not like he's ever truly had a full great season. And I don't think the Dodgers are as good of a landing spot as some people kind of have made it out to be.
I agree with you. In fact, the Dodgers rotation, it's a real conundrum now because of guys. What happens to guys like, David Price is still in that rotation too. So you have Buehler, Kershaw, Price, Bauer. And then you have a couple of young, good pitchers that are like Gonsolin, Urias,
Justin May. Yeah.
May. What is going to happen to these 3? Yeah, they have too many. Like always, the Dodgers are jam-packed, but that completely gets rid of the idea that Bauer's going to pitch every 4th day. That's out the window. And I'm not knocking him. Look at how much money he's getting paid. But as far as fantasy value goes, it cannot be the best landing spot for Bauer just because of the crowded rotation that they have. And what do you think about drafting Julio Urias, who was good in the bullpen when they put him in there? And I have a feeling they're going to ship him back there. Dustin May and Gonsolin.
You have to have less interest in them now because of Bauer. And, like you said, pitching every 4th day, probably not going to happen with that rotation, right? The thing I'm really interested to see with Bauer is how deep he goes into games, because the past few years, he's had the longest leash of any pitcher in baseball. He's Trevor Bauer. He's a freak. And he just throws like 110 pitches every game. But now he's going to Dave Roberts. Dave Roberts hates letting his starters go deep into games. Like, he'll pull them at the first sign of trouble. He'll pull a good starter at 60 pitches. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with Bauer, but, if he's not like elite level ratios and he falls back even a little bit in terms of that in-game volume, he starts throwing 100 pitches a game or something. Like I just think there's a little bit of that risk there that people aren't weighing. And I imagine that's something he had conversations with when he signed with the team, like whatever.
Yeah.
Dave Roberts isn't going to pull him at 90 pitches every game, but it's just something to keep in the back of your head, I think.
And Bauer does walk back. I mean, his biggest problem is walks, because he will come out there and he'll just start throwing all kinds of pitches, and he will get behind in the count. A lot of times you're watching him pitch. He's great fun to watch pitch, but he will definitely get behind in counts. He will walk batters. And I don't know if that's, but I think about immediately when you say that Dave Roberts likes to pull pitchers out. That Kershaw is constantly pitching like 6 or 7 innings. And I thought Kershaw was like not done a couple years ago, but absolutely not going to be what he has been the last few seasons. Going into last year, it was the fact that in 2019, every single one of his starts were 6 innings. And that's unbelievable for a guy that had problems with his back,
Absolutely. What he's done has really been incredible. Like, he was a guy I was drafting every single year when he was like really at his peak. And I kind of became hesitant on Kershaw between, his strikeout rate falling off, between his back issues. But he's just kept being great, so, it's really impressive what he's done.
It's funny. I never used to draft him when he was like $40. When he was at his peak and he was literally like winning leagues. There were about 3 seasons straight that you look at the winner of the league and it's almost guaranteed that they have Clayton Kershaw on their team. He was just winning leagues. But I finally got some Clayton Kershaw last year because he's going for a decent price and he's still just as good as he was. But it happens till it doesn't. You know what I mean? He's only 32.
Yep, that's exactly it. It happens till it doesn't. And I got off too early. But he is creeping up there in age now. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how long he can keep this up for.
I will draft him though every time, because to me,
he
doesn't show any signs of starting to even struggle with innings or with going deep into games or with walks or any of that, because when Kershaw is bad, he is like still better than 99% of the pitchers in baseball. And just the consistency alone is unmatched. So
that's
I have one more question for you about your opinion on a player that just moved from Colorado to the Cardinals. And I had but a debate on our show a couple weeks ago with Steve Gardner and Lenny. And we did a little auction for Nolan Arenado, and the bidding went up to $26. And I was like super happy that I got him at $26. And they told me that they would not pay $26. Obviously we probably don't have to explain the reasons. He was hurt last year. He played hurt for way longer than he should have. We don't really know if he's going to be full power or whatever, fully healed up by the start of the season, but the chances are good that he will. He didn't need surgery, but they're saying like the 4th round is good for Arenado. And I say, I don't understand what anything in the statistics would say to doubt this guy. And if this is the case where he's going in like the 3rd round even, I would say that's a great value for Nolan Arenado.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I would probably lean a little more towards Lenny and Steve's side. Like Arenado, for one thing, like everyone's going to talk about it, but Coors Field I do think is a big deal. I think leaving Coors is going to be a big deal for Arenado. He's tough because his StatCast stuff has really gone down, like very steadily declined the last 5 years and really bottomed out last year. But like you said, he was probably playing hurt for longer than he should have been. And that's something that it's tough to quantify and account for. And so, the bat is the highest system on Arenado, I think, last I checked. It still does like him on the Cardinals. The Bat X likes him less because of the StatCast stuff, but like the injuries are the kind of the wild card here. So if you really think that he's just been playing hurt the last, year plus, and he's just going to get back to who he was, then maybe he is going to be a value.
So because I don't know what I guess there's more stats than what I see at RotoWire. There's an advanced stats section at RotoWire that I love looking at because it has contact rate, it has strikeout rate, it has walk rate. And so these are things, and it has fly ball, line drive, whatever. BABIP, I know that a lot of people don't use that anymore. But as far as like the fringe stats, right? Like contact, that's a huge one for me. I'm always looking at contact, and I don't see any kind of decline in contact. I do see that he is maybe walking a little bit less than he used to, but as far as striking out, I don't see that. I do not see the contact rate going down. It's still like 80. Last year was 89%, but that's not normal. I mean, it's in the low 80s on average for the last, ever since he came up to the majors. It's relatively the same.
Yeah, he's still a very good contact hitter. Like he's not going to strike out a lot, and that's something that has not declined with him. Like he's probably actually gotten better in that regard the last couple of seasons.
So his max exit velocity last year was 109. His average exit velocity did drop down 5 miles an hour, so that's quite significant, I suppose. But which stats do you mean when you say that we've watched these stats decline over the last 4 or 5 years?
So I actually put a Twitter post a couple weeks ago, if anyone wants to go and look for it, where I kind of cited some of this. But like if you look at his barrel rate, in 2016, his barrel rate was 75th percentile. Since then, every year it's gotten worse, where last year it was 34th percentile. If you look at his launch angle on his hardest hit balls, 2016 was 80th percentile. Again, started to decline last year, 30th percentile. His exit velocity on fly balls, 2018 was 82nd percentile. Last year was 45th percentile. So like there are, I think, some warning signs with him. But again, if he's playing hurt, then maybe they're not warning signs. Maybe he was just playing hurt.
It's hard to tell. And, throw in the fact that it was just a short season last year and you just don't even know where to go from there. Like Yelich is another one that people don't seem to be that bothered by Yelich and his batting average. I mean, not just his batting average, his strikeout rate was unbelievable last year. Like, what the hell? So people seem much more able to overlook Christian Yelich bad season than they are willing to overlook other hitters' bad seasons.
Yeah, people I've noticed, are really selectively, picking the lens they're viewing 2020 through, that to kind of to fit whatever narrative they want to fit. Like either it's too small of a sample size and we have to throw it out, or well, this is what the guy did last year, so he definitely made some big improvements, or he made some big declines, and we got to trust that. It's like, guys, you can't have it both ways.
No, and I think, people probably ask you questions on Twitter or just ask for your advice between two players, and, you give them your opinion, and then they go, but what about if I do, and it's like, wait a minute, you just tell me who you want me to say, and then I'll do that for you, because this is where it's going to end. A lot of times people just want reinforcement for what they already want to believe is true.
Yes. 100%. People go to touts in search of confirmation bias. Basically, they want the tout to tell them what they already want to believe. And if the tout tells them something different, a lot of times they're like, well, I'm just going to do it anyway. It's like, well, why did you ask?
It's unbelievable. It's crazy. It's just human nature, though. So speaking of that, I know there's a couple stats. We talked about this at first pitch. I can't remember which stats they are, but there's a couple stats that stabilize quicker than the rest of the stats. So, do you know offhand what these stats are? They are really good for young players that don't have a lot of, stat data in their profile.
Yeah, so I mean, strikeout rate and walk rate stabilize very quickly. Sprint speed stabilizes exceptionally quickly. A lot of these StatCast stuff, barrels, exit velocity, launch angle type stuff, they stabilize fairly quickly, not as quick as a lot of people believe, and not a whole lot quicker than just like basic ground ball percentage, fly ball percentage stuff that we've had for years, but they stabilize at a fairly quick rate, most of the StatCast stuff.
The strikeout and walk rate scare me just because so you do notice sometimes a pitcher will come up, he'll pitch around maybe a couple months in the major leagues, and then after he starts facing teams more than one time, the catcher and the the batters are able to start seeing, I mean, if you don't always work on your downfalls, then their batters or pitchers are going to figure it out. They're going to attack right there. So it scares me with the strikeouts and the walks, because I think that a lot of times pitchers aren't as good as they appear to be early.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. I mean, baseball is very much a game of adjustments. You can be doing one thing and then the opponent realizes what you're doing and they adjust. And so you need to adjust to what their adjustment was. So yeah, I mean, that's the thing with any of this, with any form of analyzing players. There's always room for error. It's an imprecise science. We do the best we can with the information we have, but you know, there are games within games within games going on in these players' heads that we're just kind of trying to get our best feel for that we can.
For sure. And I don't know for sure if thinking that relying on a projection system like it's 100% or even close is a bad mistake. There isn't even a projection system as perfect as possible, because it's not possible to be more than 70% accurate. It's just not possible. I think with the DFS and stuff, I think, you know, you can definitely gain an edge by having a tool like the bat, for sure, because the bat takes into consideration, like we said, all of the umpires, the ballparks, the pitcher that they're going up against, everything about that ballpark, everything about the current situation. As much as we know, like, we don't know if that player slept last night good, or if he has a sore foot, or if like he's having a bad day, or, you know, any of those things. But like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is, I assume that his exit velocity and his hard contact are still through the roof, and he's actually being drafted now in the same spot that he was being drafted before he came up as a rookie. He was still a prospect in the 4th round, and I say I'm all ready to jump on the Vladdy bandwagon, because this guy is solid. He has proven that he is willing to work hard, to lose weight, to be, you know, his body is naturally like a big boy. And so he's actually taken the steps that he never had to do when he was in the minor leagues, but now he does, and he's doing it. And I think that's a good sign.
Oh, I completely agree. I'm a big Vlad Jr. fan. I think there is still very much upside for him to become one of the best hitters in the game. Like you said, his StatCast numbers, the exit velocity stuff especially, are off the charts. His max exit velocity is 99th percentile, you know, every year. He doesn't hit the ball in the air enough. That's, I think, the biggest knock against him, but his plate discipline is pretty good. He hits the ball really hard. If he just gets it in the air a little bit more, like, he's going to have a big year one year.
He's going to have a big year soon. And the fact that the other kids on that team too, like Bo Bichette and Biggio, are growing at an excellent rate as well. They're both very good batters early in their career. And the three of them, along with the fact that Toronto is actually trying to get better, and they might be able to compete with the Yankees, especially if they get another pitcher like Taijuan Walker. That would be fabulous.
Yeah, honestly, I think the bat has the Blue Jays projected as the best offense in the American League. Like, they're I have to double check that, but like, the Blue Jays offense is really, really good.
That's great. Okay. Anybody but the Yankees, for real. Thank you so much for coming on tonight, Derek. I really appreciate you coming on such short notice. And I hope that our listeners got some information, and you can go ahead and find the bat over at Roto Grinders. And I know that if you get it before the season, it's a good deal. Or maybe you have a coupon code. Do you have any promo codes for our listeners?
I don't. I'm sorry. It's actually not even for sale yet. Probably another week or two, but it'll be rotogrinders.com/the-bat. I'll be tweeting about it. Yeah, I mean, any questions you have, I'm always more than willing to answer anything. Tweet at me, DM me, whatever. And thank you for having me on, Andrea.
So the bat that I'm using is from last year, or what you said it's not out yet, but maybe that's just the one that you sell at Roto Grinders.
Right. Sorry, you cut out for a second there. The DFS one at Roto Grinders is not for sale yet. The season-long one is free at Fangraphs and at EV Analytics, so that's already out. You can go over it right there right now and see it.
Yeah, you don't need the other one until DFS starts, I guess, right?
Exactly.
Because hello,
not till the season.
Okay, thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it, and good luck this year. I will. I don't get to see you in person this time, but I look forward to the day we can again.
I mean, hopefully this fall things will be normal. We'll be able to do first pitch Arizona again or something. That's my hope.
That's like I never wanted to go so much to Arizona in my life.
Yeah, it's a fun time. I've missed all that stuff the last year.
For sure, me too. Okay, thanks again. Everybody have a good night.
Thanks a lot.